Hey there, several weeks ago I was driving down the road thinking about analog synthesizers. I love these instruments, I enjoy playing them, and I love the way they sound. The very first thing that I do with them is record them into a digital system. So why don't I just have digital synthesizers? That'd be a little bit cheaper. Maybe a lot cheaper, actually. Let's talk about it. For me, the romance of analog sound lies in its physicality. When you listen to an old LP, you're hearing the actual vibrations of the musician's original performance, turned into an electric signal and then etched onto vinyl. It's a tangible, physical connection to that moment in history. On the flip side, digital recording takes those same vibrations and turns them into ones and zeros. Now, this method is actually perfectly capable of producing incredibly high-resolution audio, but it lacks the authenticity and some of the character of analog sound. Now, for this reason, a whole lot of musicians will maintain a fully analog signal path, believing that it'll bring that extra level of authenticity that'll take their music to the next level. But does it really mean that analog is better than digital? Not necessarily. One of the funny things that you may run into if you have this conversation with somebody else is the idea that analog instruments are worth seeking out because they are warmer than digital instruments. Well, what does warmth mean in the context of music? If you haven't spoken to a lot of people who are talking about sound, you probably won't know. Well, the truth is, I'm not sure they do either. People tend to use that term to mean different things. However, the most common thread that I can detect is the absence of clear high frequencies. If something doesn't have really clear highs, you could describe it potentially as warm. So then, is that a good thing? If your instrument is missing frequencies, does that make it more desirable? My inclination would be to say no. So what's really going on here? Well, the problem isn't with your instrument, I'm pleased to say. All of your analog instruments aren't broken and they're not missing frequencies. The warmth people associate with analog instruments is more likely a result of the combination of deficiencies in older recording equipment that the owners and makers of those devices and systems would have loved to overcome. Today, if you want your recording to sound more warm, that is something you can accomplish even in your digital audio workstation without much difficulty. So why would we seek out expensive analog instruments and sound sources if the very first thing that we're going to do is record them into a computer? Well, for me, part of the answer to that question is that I want to preserve the highest possible quality of that sound until I print my final track. If you are recording with a software synth or a digital instrument, you are starting with a sound source which has been modified probably multiple times digitally. If you record your analog instrument directly into the DAW, then you are starting off with a much purer sound, even though it is ultimately a digital recording. Okay, we're about to wrap up, but before I let you go, here's 3 tips for getting the most out of an analog first workflow in your DAW. Firstly, don't overprocess your sounds. You paid for that really nice synthesizer, so go ahead and let the raw character of that sound shine through. Secondly, use analog processing on digital sounds to bring some of that analog character back to those sounds. A great example of this would be taking a digital recording, recording it to a cassette tape, and then playing that cassette tape back out of the player back into your DAW. What that would do is not change the fundamental character of the sound as originally recorded, that digital sound, but what it would do is add some of that analog character on top of it. And then thirdly, wait until the last possible moment to print your digital effects. So you have a digital recording of this analog synthesizer in your DAW. You can put effects on that, but do not render them out until you're ready to render your final track. This is a way that you can avoid murking up that analog character from your analog synthesizer. If you are printing out effects on top of that throughout your process, there's a good chance you're losing a lot of that original kind of analog character. So that's just a few thoughts on analog and digital instruments, recording methods, and their pros and cons. Obviously, there's no one-size-fits-all answer for any one musician. However, it's critical to be aware of the strengths and weaknesses of the instrument that you've chosen so that you can get the most out of it and make some great music.